So Matt, I like the new gym there. Did you move or?
This is my AI generated gym. Apologies for the distorted weights here and there.
It looks good. No, I mean, it just looks like it's been a well-trained, everyone's training hard in there. Like some of the benches are a little funny too. I don't know if you've noticed that. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of funny
fit on this one. That's cool though. That said, my gym is also AI generated, so I'm sure if you look into the background, you find plenty to pick on as well.
But at least it's symmetrical. I mean, kind of. So.
I don't know though. Like mine's very plain. Yours looks like it has a lot of story to it, a lot of history. So yeah. And speaking of history, when we were chatting in our last podcast there, you went through your background and you mentioned that you had actually started out bodybuilding a lot earlier than I had, because you had that privilege of being able to start when you were 15 as opposed to having to wait until you're 18 and then falling out of it numerous times. So I wasn't really so familiar with what the bodybuilding scene was like in the 80s, other than the only exposure that I had to it was really through Conan. And then I remember that like I had an aunt that did a bodybuilding show, and I thought that was like the coolest thing because obviously your aunt in the 80s meant that she had like really strange like crimped hair and big bangs and stuff. Yeah. So so that was really cool.
Yeah,
but that's really like literally the only real memories that I have is sort of Conan and then my Auntie Andrea. So so I was wondering if you could maybe share with us kind of like what it was like back in the 80s in terms of the bodybuilding scene and some of the things that were like particularly interesting or whatever that you want to share with us.
Yeah, I'd love to. For the listeners out there too, I have to qualify this by saying that I am probably a good 10 years older than you, Craig.
That's true.
So I was able to start earlier because of that, if nothing else. I've just been around here longer. So yeah, I pretty much, I think I mentioned earlier when I started, it was about 85-ish when I first started working out. So I was quite young, mid 80s. It was kind of like part of like the popularity boom of fitness. So bodybuilding was kind of coming to the public in a good light, which was nice too. So I had access to tons of media, different than we have now with social media.
James Fonda's workout.
Exactly.
James Fonda's workout. And then what was the other one? Was it Richard Simmons or something?
Simmons. Yeah, he was doing it. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So we kind of fit into that kind of at the time. Bodybuilding was seen as healthy.
Okay.
So because of that, and it's something I can touch on a little bit more later, but you could turn on television, like regular network television in the United States, and see bodybuilding contests on like ABC Sunday Night Sports. You see the Mr. Olympia or, the Mr. Universe or whatever. It was amazing. It was like really great for me at that time, that age, to have access like that. And everybody just thought we were really healthy looking, which was nice.
Also amazing. Not only that it's on TV, that everyone had like such a health-based perception of it.
Yeah. And besides being on TV, I can try to set the stage for you a little bit, like what it looked like. So this is the 80s. So there's a lot of neon, a lot of pink, a lot of fuchsia, very Miami Vice colors.
Right.
I would read Muscle and Fitness magazine in the cafeteria at high school, lunch, high school, even all the time. And the covers had these ads for Weeder in them with, like a couple pro bodybuilders leaning on like a Ferrari or something, like 308 with their shades on and a blazer and a can of protein powder. It was just that kind of very beachy, positive,
right,
Duran-y thing happening with bodybuilding at the same time, which was kind of cool. It was fun. And I had access to a lot of books and stuff. Fortunately, were being written at that time. That was very popular somehow. I mentioned that in the last podcast. There was a series called Ripped and Beef It. George Butler, who I think went on to work on Pumping Iron, wrote some of those books, and some of the guys. So there's a lot of really cool media out there, and the magazines, of course, is where we got our influence from. And I would just copy workouts straight out of them verbatim and try them. I think that's what everybody did.
Right.
Yeah, and no surprises there, I think. And I took the supplements, the Weeder supplements, or whatever else was available at the time in the early 80s.
Was that chromium picolinate and stuff like that?
Oh, it's before that, brother. It was like Joe Weider's anabolic mega packs.
Right. Okay. Which was multivitamin or something.
Yeah, them basically a multivitamin and a golden
Gotcha.
package for 3 times the price. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah. But yeah, like I said, like, bodybuilding was kind of everywhere at the time compared to now in the real like public area, not on its own space, like it is now. We have really big presentations now, like the Arnold Classic and this whole sports festival, and Mr. Olympia is a big show in Vegas, and those are bigger shows than there were then. But there were more people from wider parts of the public were paying attention back then. If you looked at a bodybuilding crowd in one of those TV contests, and they show the cameras back at the crowd on ABC News, you'd see very regular people sitting there. There's very few bodybuilders, just regular people in little shirts and ties and glasses, and just enjoying the freak.
I think didn't they have some footage in Pumping Iron where they had a shot of the crowd and there were like guys in suits?
Yeah, exactly. That was still there.
Wearing like nice blouses and stuff. Looking very.
That was still there. Yeah,
they're about to go to dinner, but they're at
Yeah, it was like a dinner show almost.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It wasn't quite dinner showy by the 80s, but there was still that element. And I remember one aspect you don't see anymore, which I thought was kind of cool, was the pairs competitions. Remember seeing those?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. They used to have pairs competitions where you'd have a famous pro male and female bodybuilder working together. And they have a choreographed routine together.
Right.
And there was like some romance in it or whatever like that. So there'd be couples in the audience watching it together as this kind of thing, Yeah, very, very different from today. But all these kind of things, very nostalgic for me. Unfortunately, don't exist anymore today. But the biggest thing about the 80s, I remember bodybuilding wise, was this kind of, as 80s was this kind of positivity infecting the bodybuilding scene too. Like everything was just onwards and upwards. You're always just going to get better. It's always going to get bigger.
That was just the 80s, though, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, depends on what age you were in the 80s and how you viewed.
Yeah. Well, from here looking up in the 80s, like I tell you, it seemed like everyone was, on the up and up. That's for sure.
Yeah, it seemed like that was a yuppie time, you know, and BMWs became popular and stuff like that, and that infected the bodybuilding scene.
Right.
So a lot of the people at my first real gym I went to, which was called Universe Gyms in Quincy, Massachusetts, everybody there had like a blonde mullet going on and boat neck cut t-shirts, sweatshirts, and they all had Mustangs or Corvettes or some kind of muscle car like that.
Okay.
And, it was all manufactured images bigger than like dad. And they're all super nice, super friendly guys, they all look the same. They'll do the same cars. They all came to the gym. They all trained the same way, back then.
I remember I used to work with a guy who was still, I think, pretty stuck in the 80s, had the full 80s coiffed hair, mullet. And then, I mean, I only ever saw him in his work uniform, but then one day he came in when he wasn't like wearing his work uniform, and he had, it was like one of those lumberjack shirts, right?
Yeah.
But with the sleeves cut off.
Oh, yeah. Yep. I remember those. Saw a few of those in the gym back in the day too. People were training those things.
Nice.
Yeah. Let's not forget that the biggest thing back that time was parachute pants.
Yeah.
Parachute pants and the ice cream cone pants we used to call them, with a dramatic taper to the ankle. Those are I modeled those for catalog.
I do remember those from the 90s. Because I remember Dorian and Nasser and all those guys used to wear them too.
Yeah, towards the end, like in the 90s and stuff, that was still there.
Yeah,
definitely. So in the 80s, it was like everybody was tan, everybody was in a Mustang, everybody had a gold chain, everybody had wraparound sunglasses. People came into the gym like it was this big, like it was the place to be. People came to work out, of course, but they came out to see their brothers. They came out to socialize. It was like half club, half place to exercise. And because back then the training was almost exclusively, as Lee Haney used to say, stimulate, don't annihilate it. We trained hard, but it wasn't for the sake of training hard.
Sure.
It wasn't like, people weren't really growling and groaning that much, but they were training like 20, 30, 40 sets per workout.
Right.
And going hard in all of them in pyramid type structure, where we would start low with the weights, higher the reps, and then reverse that, sometimes come down the other side.
Right.
I did that. I even did double splits at one point when I was in my 20s. And I think I mentioned before, I had a fairly long career on and off again from bodybuilding. But when I got out of teens and wanted to go to men's, I said, I have to give this everything. So I left my job at State Street Bank at 19, and just stayed home, ate, and trained. I go to the gym in the morning, go home, eat, and go back in the evening and train again.
Wow, so many questions there. Like, how did you support that lifestyle?
Mom.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Yeah. I was 19, right. And I had a very forgiving mother who worked at the bank at that time, and would get me a job all the time, and I would do that job, and then I stepped away from it very, very politely, very gracefully and gratefully. Didn't want to step on anybody's toes, but
right.
Everybody understood this is what I was all about at that time. I had just done well at the Teenage Nationals, NPC Nationals.
Yeah.
And I was getting all this attention from American Sports Network, Newsweek, and I just started writing for them for their show, American Muscle Magazine. So it looked possible. It didn't look totally crazy.
Sure.
And it wasn't, again, it was a very positive light back then.
So you were chasing your dream, and mom's like, yeah, go for it.
Exactly. Yeah. For a little while, see how far I can go.
That's awesome.
Give him a long leash, she bought me my food.
That's really cool.
That was the time. So at that Teenage Nationals show, it was a collegiate NPC as well. John Perillo was there. That may be a name some people know John Perillo from back in the days. He was the cap try guy who had everybody drinking medium triglycerides and doing fascial stretching.
Okay.
But John was the first guy who really revved up the 80s diet. The 80s diet was very low fat, moderate protein, and high carbohydrate. And it wasn't about chasing huge quantities of food. That didn't happen until in the 90s and 2000s, right? But John was the first guy who came on and started pushing that.
Right.
So when I met John, talked to him, I went home after that contest. I bought my cap try, I started drinking my cap try, and I tried to put down 8,000 calories a day. As long as I could of clean food. So I was putting oil on everything to get the calories up. Yeah. And my mom would buy me the chicken breasts, and I would eat the pasta and the rice and the oatmeal and drizzle oil on everything to get the calories up. Probably a couple thousand calories of oil every day. Yeah. But
that's not low fat though.
No. So he really kind of changed that and had the big argument that it wasn't digestible and blah, 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 But we know now energy is energy, right? So it doesn't really matter. But
closed chain thermodynamic system.
Yes, it's magic, basically. Yeah, it didn't really work out that way.
Yeah.
But some of the things that did survive, obviously, fascial stretching came into the 2000s in a different way. Shows up, stretching, extreme stretching, becoming a thing. But in the 80s, this was kind of new, and it was really like I mentioned, like the diet back then. You would open up, not yet Flex magazine, it was still Muscle and Fitness, and see Lee Haney's diet or Rich Gaspari's diet. And again, moderate protein, very high carbs, relatively not very high like today's guys, but pretty high for guys who are about 200 pounds, maybe even below that on stage as pros. And they were talking things about, like carbohydrate with spare protein. Remember that? Which is, has some legitimacy to it, right? You would eat more carbs instead of protein, and it was all like really focused on health, lots of vegetables and fruits in the diets they would give you, and trying to eat clean, and it looked like a health food store with just more protein.
So the question here is, I want to ask you about the training stuff in a second too, but the nutrition in these diets, Rich Gaspari's diet. So do you think that was actually his diet, or was it something that the editors of the publications had put together and said that this is the style that we want to promote?
That's an interesting question. I think my personal feelings are there was a good deal of truth in it.
Okay.
I think it did at least originate with some of them, and I think it was deployed by them. But I know for a fact, because I was on the inside of the media for a while at that time in a different way, that a majority of the stuff you read was basically ghost written.
That's what I was thinking, right?
Fabricated for them,
especially with like a lot of the routines and stuff I've heard now are like not necessarily really accurate in terms of how they used to train. It was more like the basic concepts of how they used to train, but made in sort of a more palatable format.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I suppose palatability is key, whether it's food or training, right? You got to be able to
Yeah.
get people to take that in and make it their own, so that
Mm.
you can, sell magazines, right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's
Exactly.
kind of what it was,
Yeah.
That was it was accepted. That was just the way it was. We didn't have an alternative back then, right? So that
Mm.
was, it was
Of
the
course.
TV shows sometimes, the magazines, and then finally American Muscle Media on ESPN, which I worked for, doing Muscle Mania TV show, American Muscle, which became the
So,
Muscle Media
so
contest.
Muscle Making a TV. What's that all about? Like, what was what was it? I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't see it because in Canada we didn't have ESPN.
Oh,
So-
right. Yeah. So I'm speaking a very American centric point of view here. Forgive me.
Please educate your ignorant northern brother.
Yeah. So yeah, at the time, there was another network in California called American Sports Network that worked with ESPN, which is the big one, and they had a show they developed called American Muscle Magazine.
Mhm.
Muscle Mania came later from that same people as a contest series, which is still going today, I believe.
Oh wow.
Yeah, but American Muscle Magazine at the time was this show where they had pretty big names. They had I can't remember her name right now. Corey Everson's sister was one of the main hosts, and a lot of other people were main hosts on that. ESPN was also running bodybuilding type shows too. I shouldn't digress too much, but so everybody knows, like, there was Flex TV around 1991.
Okay.
You would see, I remember seeing Sean Ray, Flex Wheeler, and Boyer Co. working out together, I think.
Wow.
All in spandex and showing us their exercises for real,
Striped clothing and
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, the striped spandex, actually, the bodysuits. Yeah, absolutely.
Striped
100%.
bodysuit.
Yeah. So that was the era we were in, and those people we do is like, so for American Muscle Magazine, after I worked with the people who ran that, they scouted me as a bodybuilder, I ended up working for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote several episodes, actually, 2 subjects. I wrote one episode for Penny Price, who was a great bodybuilder back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I interviewed her on the phone and said, "How do you work out your glutes? Let's write a script."
Right.
So I wrote a glute script, and then I did Sean Ray for about 6 weeks as he got ready for the 1990 Mr. Olympia. I'd call him up, interview him, write his script. So that was the show was like that. It was kind of like spotlight on a bodybuilder, kind of a storyline, then maybe talk about some supplements and do like a contest wrap-up review of the contest happening around.
Sure.
Which is pretty cool. And it was one of the only ways you could get it, unless you picked up NPC News Magazine sometime, which was not everywhere. You had to be an NPC member to get that. Or maybe wait for it to come out 2 months later in Muscle and Fitness or Flex later.
Yeah.
So
that was what I always saw, right? Was I would see like the results in Flex.
Yeah.
It'd be like, so and so won the USA's or something. But like, of course, I had no connection with that really, because as a Canadian, obviously, the only thing in there that was really sort of felt like it was close to home was they had the Toronto Night of Champions or something. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah. But so they would have like one pro show in Toronto every year, and that was kind of like, the only time I saw anything regarding bodybuilding. So like it's neat to hear about all of the stuff that you guys actually had. That's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, bodybuilding obviously at the time was a very uniquely American thing. I mean, it kind of proliferated throughout North America, but very, very American, very LA at the time. Even like the best bodybuilders flew to. It was kind of an unsaid thing. If you were a great bodybuilder in Massachusetts, even the days of my days when Paul DeMeo was there and Mike Matarazzo were there, they left Massachusetts and at least tried California, because you just don't know what you did. Thing. So that was definitely a mecca of bodybuilding, as people say, from the Arnold days.
Right.
And all the great bodybuilders are out there. I mean, I think Lee Labrada moved out there from Texas, and Rich Gaspari had moved out there. I think Lee Haney spent time out there, and Mike Christian was already out there, I think. And all these great names of that era were all either there all the time or at least part-time, just all converging. And you'd walk into a Gold's Gym and see all those guys just train there. And they would even live with each other sometimes. Gaspari and Haney live with each other, I think, while they're in competition a couple times.
Wow, that's amazing.
You don't see that happening today.
Yeah, no, definitely. But I mean, in today's bodybuilding culture, there is that sort of like, that sort of mecha mentality to an extent, right? Like we've got Golds in Venice Beach.
Yep.
And then we've got Bevs out in Syosset.
Yep.
And then you've got, I think Flex Lewis is doing a good job with his Dragon's Lair.
Yeah.
Vegas. Yeah, that seems to be turning out, like a lot of guys seem to be training there. And then you got Pure Muscle and Fitness up in Toronto, which is big on the Canadian scene. And then on the West Coast, you've got West Coast Iron in Vancouver, which obviously is much. It's yeah. I mean, it's the place for the West Coast bodybuilding scene, but I think that, like, if you were to pick sort of the national center of bodybuilding in Canada, it would be Pure Muscle and Fitness right now.
Yeah, nowadays, yeah.
And then you've got Dubai, right? That's where the O2 gyms is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you're right on that. Yeah.
And then where else is there big meccas globally? I don't know of any. I was under the impression that, like, I don't know, it seems like the UK bodybuilding scene is one that's pretty interesting to me these days, because they seem to be putting out a lot of good bodybuilders from there. But I don't think that they have like a single place where people conglomerate. It's kind of more like everyone's got their local.
Which is much more what the US was in the 1980s.
Yeah, it feels a lot more like that.
Yep.
Like, yeah, that sort of more like roots, like hardcore, because it doesn't seem like they have a ton of the big box gyms out there either. It seems to be more like quite an independent market. Yeah.
I mean, at that time in the States, Gold's Gym was still just kind of on the cusp of becoming really strongly franchised.
Okay.
In the 80s, like there's a few Gold's Gyms around, not many. I went to one in Massachusetts. Used to bump into Marky Mark in there once in a while because Massachusetts.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
New Kids in the Block used to work out there. Wow. That's on the date and the time as well, you know. But yeah, it was mostly like a bunch of gyms run by guys who were bodybuilders.
Yeah.
Or like to hang out with bodybuilders.
Yeah.
Some way, and just a bunch of guys just grinding at it. It was just a thing, you know.
So the change that there were, the major. I remember that at one point there was one that was called the World Gym.
Yeah, I went to a World Gym. I was going to say that.
Yeah. So
towards the end,
there was Gold's, and then World Gym came out as a competitor to Gold's or something.
That was Joe Gold's gym after he sold his name.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Okay, that makes
we got rid of the bald guy. And we got the gorilla holding the.
Yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, which I kind of like. That was cool. I don't.
Yeah, the gorilla standing on the globe with the deadlifting, wasn't he?
Yep. And that's the eras, like, because I remember you talking about World's Gym. So I was in that other gym I talked about through my first show, and then I moved to another gym across the street, which was a new World's Gym because it was new and had like everything. And they like come over here. That was like back then. They try to get you to come to the gym because they have a big bodybuilder there. More young kids will come in and sign up.
Yeah.
I mean, does that happen anymore? I don't think so. Maybe it does, kind of, somewhere in the big gyms, maybe. So they take me to the back room, like, what do you want? What do you clothes? Give me all the sweatshirts and the varsity jackets, and we'll take care of your hotel, and which was like a big deal back then because this was the only money available in bodybuilding was weeder contracts at that era. They didn't have big supplement contracts. Something like you might get picked up by a gym that would cover some of your costs, right? But unless you're under Weeder's umbrella, you didn't make money. I mean, it just wasn't happening yet, which is one of the reasons why I got my closest friend reached the top in AAU, which was another league, the American Athletic Union, which competed with the NPC.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they did everything else as well as bodybuilding. And my friend went to the top of that, and there was nowhere to go. They'd have to go to NABA in Europe to make money, you know, Mr. Universe and that kind of stuff. And they have to go to Europe, so he kind of backed out of it. But it showed how few actual options there were to make a living at bodybuilding. Just a handful of people could do it.
So you just mentioned NABA, which raised more questions. So
this is NABA back then, not NABA now.
No, but that's what I'm talking about. Right? Like, so now we know NABA as like the bodybuilding federation that's got that like sports model class, sports model class, or they've got like the Miss Fitness class, right? Which is like they wear fitness gear, but they don't actually do a fitness routine like you see in fitness in IFBB. It has kind of like my image of NABA now is that it's a little bit more almost a hybrid between bodybuilding and also modeling. Like I feel like there's a much greater emphasis being placed on not just your physical aesthetics, but also facial and things like that. And then also, I know that like
beauty.
with the sports model class, like I know that like I've noticed that the guys seem to like spend tons of money on their posing trunks, because there's like guys are wearing Gucci and all this kind of stuff, right? Which obviously for us,
Gucci make posing trunks. That's interesting.
that's what I'm saying. I didn't even know that, right? But you know, guys have got them, so yeah. But it's just like, well, I don't know if they're posing trunks. Who knows? Maybe they're actually just like either underwear or a swimsuit or something. I don't know.
Right.
Like, and to be honest, I haven't looked it up. So, you know, like, but it's just, it's so different from, you know, like what we see in the IFBB Pro League or in the NPC Worldwide, that sort of thing. So they've sort of like carved these very distinct paths. And I'm curious, like back in those days, was it similar? Like, did they have like, you know, was NABA like sort of more, I don't know, kind of, for lack of better expression, like good looking oriented, and then the NPC was a little bit more like hardcore, or, you know, was it?
No, it's a good question. And it kind of, I mean, this is the part kind of glossing over, which is probably obvious to many people, but not everybody, that at that time there was only bodybuilding. You know, there was nothing else. There was no men's physique, of course. There was nothing for the women except for women's. There was men's bodybuilding and women's bodybuilding. That's it.
Right.
Everywhere.
Right.
All the globe, right? And I think the IFBB, because it had Weider, Ben and Joe, and the magazines, it was more glossy.
Sure.
You know, it had more potential to get you in front of cameras and faces and stuff like that. So it had a certain look to it. NABA, my impression at the time, again, I was only 19-ish, and this is pre-internet, so I could just go look it up and see what it looked like. NABA was old school. NABA was the Mr. Universe. NABA was the Mr. Europe, the Mr. World.
Gotcha.
Those kind of things. And it was just, again, strictly bodybuilding. And from what I could see, very little press after the fact.
Okay.
But they would tour around Europe, and they would win prize money at shows.
Okay.
That was how you would make some money.
Yeah.
And that was, as far as that's really it. I mean, there's a few magazines in Europe too, obviously, that would put you in there and pay you some cash for being a fold, I guess. But there wasn't a lot. So the only money to be had in the game was the Weeders. And the only option, if you didn't like being IFBB, was to go to NABA over in Europe, which was a massive life change. You
mentioned women's bodybuilding, and I want to jump on that. Women's bodybuilding in 1980s.
Rachel McLish.
Yes, exactly. Miss Olympia. In your estimation, what is that class closest to in today's iterations of classes?
It'd be hard to find exact fit. God, I'd probably put them. I mean, it's hard to say because it's just that the goals were different, but the mass, the muscle they carry is probably somewhere between bikini and wellness, with much less attention to the legs than wellness, of course. Probably a little more like just a touch of women's figure and the upper body muscularity, especially towards the end of that, when before Bev Francis got in the scene and changed everything.
Right.
You know, like Yates changed everything in men's bodybuilding. Before that, I mean, Rachel McClish has some good shoulders. Lisa Lorio, I talked about Penny Price, who I worked with, you know, great shape, great flow. There's a whole bunch of great ones from back then. But, you know, and of course, Corey Everson. I can't forget Corey Everson. Olympia several times, you know. Probably women's figure right now for Corey, you know. But a little bit before, Rachel McClish was definitely like bikini.
I remember Rachel McClish, that's for sure. Because I remember seeing pictures of her with permed hair and a headband, and I think probably 3-pound weights.
Little pink weight. Like, you know,
but like chrome in the picture.
Yeah, chrome. Yeah. Those are the days, and that's probably, you know, for better or for worse, that's why bodybuilding was so well accepted back then. It was very approachable,
a lot more like palatable, as we were just saying, right? Like a bit more like, okay, if I'm a woman and I train, I might look like Rachel McLeish, but I'm not necessarily going to look like Andrea Shaw, who is just the most amazing Miss Olympia ever, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So it was not just more palatable, I think it was more approachable.
Right.
You know, when we can see themselves going some part of that journey, like you kind of hinted at, like I'm going to pick up some weights, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to exercise, you know.
Right.
That was when Arnold was, you know, softened down and started selling books on general health and fitness and things like that. And, you know, with his movie appearances after Conan.
Yeah, he had come right down, hadn't he, for like, what was it, Predator and stuff? He was a bit smaller.
Knowing him, he probably came down quite a bit afterwards and just got bigger for the shows.
Right.
If you remember, anybody remember seeing Pumping Iron? I mean, there's a couple off-season shots in there, and he is not a regular guy, but he's not the Arnold you know. I mean, he would just shrink down quite a lot because Arnold is, as I heard him put it once, he did it to win.
Sure.
He didn't do it to walk around and be the biggest guy around. He didn't really care.
Right.
He was just going to win that day when he had on stage. So everything was about that. So he would just, you know, dial back as much as he wanted to otherwise. And
so that makes me wonder then, is he a super responder like Kevin Levrone or something?
Probably.
I think so. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, everybody has an opinion about Arnold. I mean, that's my era. So I always hold him as the greatest, you know, and I look at how good he was, the thickness he had at a time when that was not required. You know what I mean? Like if you think about what he could do today with today's requirements, I think even more, you know.
Well, also with today's access to everything,
all the knowledge, nutrition, everything, right? Yeah. I think it was Ronnie Coleman. I saw an interview with him once saying that he felt Arnold was the best bodybuilder of all time. It's interesting to come from his lips, you know.
I'm from the greatest bodybuilder.
Yeah, probably. I think he is the greatest, but to say that about Arnold was pretty impressive.
I was never really a Ronnie fan, to be honest, because I didn't like the way that he, in my opinion, he changed the show, particularly the posing element, to a bit more of a goon show. You know, stomp around and you know, and like, you know, beg for applause and all this kind of stuff, right? Like, you know, I can't hear you, like, yeah, and then run around and like just like one shot, and then walk around to the other side of the stage, one shot, like that. When I compare that to Ali Labrada, or you know, like looking, like thinking about the names from the 80s that we're talking about, like Bob Ferris, like Ali Labrada, like
Barry DeMay, even Mike Christian was a great poser.
Just, you know, and that was really the turning point. I mean, it kind of started with Dorian, but at least Dorian still, you know, tried to express himself in his way, I guess. You know, he put some effort into his posing routines in terms of, you know, like, because I think he was trying to be like this monolith or something, and that's why he had that, like, why he would start his posing routine with that. What was that? That was the music from 2001 Space Odyssey or something, right?
Oh, okay. Kubrick.
So like this very dramatic
grand entrance,
stuff, and then so at least he kind of put that in there. But like every posing routine that I saw of Ronnie was always just him stomping around the stage and muscular, right? And that's just so anyway, I digressed here a little bit, but I'm just saying that it was from that point that it turned into a lot of this, like, you know, nobody cares about posing type stuff. Thankfully has, you know, turned the corner in the past, I'd say 5 years.
I think it has
in open bodybuilding.
Especially
that's probably thanks to Classic. You know, and the emphasis that people have put on posing in there. So so
the posing back in that era, like you mentioned, Lila Brada, Muhammad Makawi, these people, they were graceful. They were like today's Classic aspire to be, right? And probably learned a lot from those guys. You know?
Well, I mean, they're like as a Classic competitor myself, like that's really the reference era that we all look back at, right? You know, is the way that they do it, and just everything about it, right? Like just finding those old posing routines on YouTube and stuff is amazing. Like there's some Frank Zane ones that are like so good. You know?
It's fantastic. I mean, people that really took a sense of artistry, and I think we can probably talk about this and segue into another episode about when things changed, because I think there's definitely when things changed. Obviously, before Ronnie, there was Dorian who changed things. But there's something that most people have forgotten, and I think rightfully so. It should be forgotten. Was was Vince McMahon's World Bodybuilding Federation.
Whoa.
You remember the Bodybuilding Federation?
I know Vince McMahon. That's enough.
You didn't know the World Bodybuilding. Oh, I mean, he's an awful human being, right? So, but we know that. but he made the World Bodybuilding Federation.
Right. I have heard about that. Yeah.
I can't remember the exact year. It must be like 91-ish or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, take pro wrestling and all of its showmanship.
Yes.
Put that on bodybuilders.
Showmanship.
Nice. And you went from Lee Haney posing.
Yep.
To David Dirth, the wild child, come out on a motorcycle.
Oh.
With all this gear and stuff, and hit whatever poses, strip down, and do this kind of goofy stuff. And I don't know if that was it, but I think that certainly kind of poked something in the balloon of great posing, of great presentation.
Yeah. Okay.
Did what people what they thought they might be looking for in bodybuilding. And on the other side of that, then you had really big guys because Vince wanted everybody big.
Yeah.
So you watch those shows, I think Gary Stridham was the biggest guy back then.
Gary Stridham. Yeah.
He was amazing. I mean, he was, he still looks good too last time I saw him. But he was like the poster boy for WWF.
Right.
I mean, WBF. And all those guys came out like really quite watery, a little bit off compared to IFBB, but big.
I wonder why.
Yeah, it was big. It was all big back then, for that show, big and dramatic. And that, I think, that kind of set that segue into a new era. It wasn't Vince's credit, certainly, but it definitely did shift things, definitely did change things at the time, I think, and maybe let the door open for a different era, and that was the time when Haney was wrapping up, 8 Mr. Olympias already, and, new people were coming in, like Dorian Yates, who hadn't quite yet reached his pinnacle yet, but definitely was a big shift. There's a few different cultural things happening in the bodybuilding scene that were kind of propagating it, and I think that Vince McMahon's organization was one of them. Really did change things.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So okay, so we rolling back, we've got the NPC/IFBB, and then we've got AIA,
American Athletic Union, right? Amateur Athletic Union. Yeah. Yep.
What happened with the interaction between those federations? Like, did you have people that would compete? Could you only compete in one of the two federations, or could you go back and forth? Or
it was quite. I don't know if I call it jealousy between the organizations, but definitely competitiveness between the two. My impression was the younger years was more AAU shows. AAU shows would be held in like high school gymnasiums.
Okay.
That kind of thing, which wasn't a bad thing. I mean, there were not big halls back then for bodybuilding. We didn't do it in Vegas yet. But there was more of them because it was the Amateur Athletic Union. They did wrestling and all these other sports as well. So they had this big mechanism to do it. And so there were guys who went through that. So I don't know, for better or for worse, like many of the best guys came from my area of New England at that time. So we had Matt Dufresne, who won Mr. America. We had Jeff King. Some people know about Jeff King. It was all about the neck and the quad sweep and stuff.
Right. The neck.
And and some of my closest friends were AAU guys.
Okay.
And one of them, he went, I don't want to put his name on here because he's got a whole life, but he went quite high, as high as he could go. And then he knew that IFBB was where the money was. He was where the money was.
Yeah.
So he wanted to go out to California and compete in the Tournament of Champions. I don't know if that name rings a name to you. Rings a name to you, but that was like the big show on the West Coast back then. There were not that many shows back then.
Yeah.
That was the big one. And they refused to let him in.
Oh.
Because he had to start over at the bottom like everybody else.
Oh, wow.
Didn't matter. He was holding a significant title from the AAU. He had to go through the whole machine. And he was like, nope, not having that. Thank you very much. I'm retaring.
Fair enough.
So they were quite clear about delineation of the two. And I think there was maybe a little bit of nastiness there too between the two organizations.
Yeah. But that's not really that that's not that surprising because
now with this more, right?
It's today, right? Worse. So like for example, here in Japan, as you know, JBBF, like once you're a JBBF athlete, you cannot participate in any other shows or federations or whatever.
Excommunicated.
Yeah, and it's so militant, like and And it's like, if you do, it's like a big scandal and you're going to be reported and all this kind of stuff. It's like, holy shit, man.
Yeah.
Like, is it like, it's just bodybuilding. Like,
yeah, it's just bodybuilding. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I can touch on one JBBF story if I can. I think I've told this to you before, but when I was in Japan in the mid 90s, I lived here from 95 to 98. And I was going to a gym for free on the condition that I would compete. So I came out of competing. I hadn't competed since 1989. And I decided to do a show, Mr. Saitama, in 1997, because that's where I lived, Saitama area. Yeah, and I dieted best I could with what we had, trained best I could with what I had, which wasn't ideal, wasn't US stuff. But yeah, I remember going to that show and being the only person I knew who got drug tested. Didn't see anybody else around because I was about 20 kilograms heavier than everybody else, and that was just me. I mean, I wasn't. They wouldn't have found anything, but that was just me. But when I walked in, not only that, but they searched my bag when I went in, and they pulled out a little ball of wine that we used to always use back then as a vasodilator.
Yeah.
Drink a little bit of wine. That was just a thing we did back then. That and niacin, you know. And no, you can't have this thing. Take it away from me. That was my first measure of militancy in the JBBF, and then the pee testing when I was dehydrated. Yeah, that was fun.
I never put that together.
Yeah.
Of course, the pee test when you're dehydrated.
Yeah. And I actually came out to the audience and kind of complained to my gym head, and he had she was like a champion JBBF female bodybuilder with him. And she said to me in Japanese, like, well, if they don't catch you now, they're going to catch you later anyway. So I was like, say what? Like, they're not going to catch anything because there's nothing to catch. You know,
support too.
I know. Yeah. That was the mindset. It was very much like, our way or the highway, and we're going to make the rules as we go along. So yeah. Sorry, rant sidebar.
Oh, good. Yeah, no, I mean, it was almost the right decade too. It was just a couple of years apart.
Yeah.
No, so that's really interesting. So it was so you had 2 JBBFs basically in the US then at that time.
Kinda, yeah, very exclusive. Yeah, and there wasn't, obviously it wasn't the money making thing about promoting bodybuilding shows back then as it is today either.
Sure,
you probably wouldn't make much if any money. It's kind of just maybe break even and do it because you enjoyed it. The people I know who did it.
Until promoting the shows.
Yeah, until it really started taking off in the bigger shows, But all the local shows, my first show was held in the auditorium of MIT, Massachusetts. Obviously MIT, and it was very low production. It was just it was not far from what you saw in Pumping Iron of like the carnival scene in the beginning. That's apart from that, honestly, things have changed a lot. Not everything for the better, but some things certainly for the better.
Yeah, I don't know about the for-profit model on the local show promotion. That one, I don't know. Like I really feel like competitors get fleeced these days because you have your membership fee.
Yeah.
You have a fee per division. So say for example, your masters bodybuilder, you can do bodybuilding or classic physique, masters and open. You enter 4 divisions, right? But like, I mean, you'd have to take a mortgage out on your house to be able to do it, right? So there's that. And then the one that kind of stings is like, they charge you a ton of money for the backstage passes, but then that backstage pass person also has to buy spectator ticket, right? And then the spectator tickets are very expensive. So it's like, if you have, I remember for the Amateur Olympia here, I remember, and I had to do the official tanning studio, right? So I had the official tanning studio, I had the local membership, the worldwide membership, the class entry fee, the tickets for the spectators, backstage pass. By the time you roll that all in together, it was like it was over $1,000.
That's nuts. Yeah,
for a show, right? And you're not even talking about your, like, my trunks aren't included in that, my coaching isn't included in that, my food, obviously, blah blah blah. There's just like, you know, it's very while I understand that the people holding these shows don't want to lose money.
Yeah.
I think there's a balance somewhere between, you know, and then like if you do win, you get like a little plastic thing, right? That looks like it costs about 5 cents on Alibaba, you know, like
probably not far off.
right. But like I know that that's not just here. That's actually copied from the US.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
Because like I remember my buddy was competing in the USA's, and I went out to see that, and it was like the cheapest spectator ticket you could get was like $150.
Wow.
And and each class was $250.
Wow.
Yeah.
Painful.
So yeah, it was pretty amazing. At least they didn't have like, you know, mandated coloring salons that are ridiculously expensive, you know, or mandated trunks or things like that. But you know, it was the costs are, I don't know, I just like, and I've also competed in shows where it's like clear they're like being run by, you know, a bunch of brands, and they just like bodybuilding. So and those shows, like, I find are, when it's, I think the for-profit model focuses so much on the for-profit part that they forget about the competitor, and they forget about the audience's experience and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. Anyways, it's sort of like a bad anti-corporate rant from your local investment banker. But still,
no, I mean, it's probably fairly timely because we're talking about transitions between this era and the next, and we'll probably pop in the next episode. But you know, talking about contests, though, I mean, the biggest contest I did was, as I said, the teenage and collegiate nationals in New Jersey. I flew down from Massachusetts to go there, and it was in the hotel itself, I think, in the ballroom or something like that. And it was a big production because NPC, you know, whatever. And there was like maybe they don't do this anymore. They had like an official videographer there who filmed us backstage, and they saw videotapes. So to buy videotapes of herself, you know. And I have myself guest posing backstage at 19 years old, which is
neat.
How's that mullet? You know, it's really good. The pink posing trunks too, very nice. But it wasn't like that at all. Of course, I mean, going backstage, like, you know, if they knew who you were and you knew what you were doing, they're like, yeah, go ahead. You know, he's over there. Go help him out. You know, bring him water. It was no big deal. It was not a thing. You know, never mind charging people. It was just accepted. It was just part of how you need people to support you, and of course,
like it's fairly obvious, you know, like I think, anyways. So
as part of the maybe the more friendly era, I would call that time. You know, you can sound like an old man talking about this stuff, but I think it's not old man stuff. It's just any young person like to have it today, where you go in the gym, you know everybody, everybody's happy to see you. You just work in, train with somebody else because why not? It's fun. You go out and do things together on the weekends as a group. We used to do this big. Massachusetts had this big tug of war every spring. We would go to the local state park, and all the gyms would show up.
Oh, okay.
And pull two ends of a giant rope and eat hot dogs and hamburgers and stuff like that. You know, like that kind of stuff. You know, I definitely missed that. Some people probably love it the way it is today, and I can see that. But you know, things started changing in the end of the '90s. I think the biggest changes were probably, I won't go into this too much, but the 1990 Steroid Act changed things a lot for a lot of people. That was the same year that Mr. Olympia was tested. And after that was when Vince McMahon had to test the World Bodybuilding Federation, and you know, things changed in many ways for many people at that era. And if nothing about health, just the image was tarnished at that time.
Absolutely.
You know, we did not see bodybuilding on TV anymore.
Yeah, you went from being the healthy sport to
not so
being
violent.
A bunch of illegal drug users.
And though I mean, the attention was on like professional sports like baseball. Somehow, because we were highly visible, we would get labeled with it more than anybody else. It was really unfortunate, but it did make a fundamental shift. And I think the general acceptance of population back then of bodybuilding is something that we will not see again. I think the general population.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
I think it will remain more fringe. And also, I think that with the evolution of gym culture, that bodybuilding isn't the only game in town anymore. There's CrossFit, there's functional training, etc., etc. So, I don't think that and then of course, like MMA is so popular, right? Like, a lot of people go to the gym because they're in MMA or whatever. So, like, I think that perhaps back in the 80s or 90s, going to the gym was eventually a road to maybe looking like a bodybuilder. Whereas now, I think going to the gym is okay if you're an athlete, or it's okay if you're a CrossFitter, it's okay if you're a functional trainer, and it's okay if you want to slam a medicine ball on the floor, and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think that was a big change in culture too, right? Because now you have a bunch of subcultures within the gym as well.
Yeah, we'll fight with each other.
When did that really splinter? Did that really splinter in about the 2000s, or was that maybe 2010s even?
Probably later. Yeah, more. The odds. Yeah.
Just sitting here going, we're talking about the 80s right now. And if we were to do like 2000, like 80s, 90s, 2000s, that's like 4 episodes away.
Yeah, we do one at a time. Exactly. Yeah, it seems longer away than that and closer than that. I mean, we had, like I said, we had the pastel bodybuilders, we had the Ferraris, we had the Lamborghinis, we had Duran, we had Air Jordan 1s. It was a time,
So what sort of music were they playing in the gyms?
What kind of music they playing in the gyms? I think general kind of pop rock at the time,
right?
Like you would turn on the radio, just like they put the radio stations on. I mean, remember radio stations?
Yeah.
In Boston, it was I don't know. I can't remember the stations because I didn't listen to rock stations so much. I listened to classical music, believe it or not, back then. Okay. But yeah, the regular rock was be playing like Led Zeppelin and Boston and all the Rush and things like that. That was gym music.
We got airplay. Hey, like in Canada, we, at least in the stations that I always used to have access to, there was nothing that would really go harder. Like AC/DC was about the hardest thing that you could hear on the radio.
Yeah, we had AC/DC.
Right. And it was like, and that didn't start making radio play until I would say it was well past actually AC/DC actually being released. So, when did the not the Black album?
Back in Black?
Back in Black, yeah.
Back in Black was probably early 80s, I think. 80s, I had the album.
Something, I think. But I don't know. It was around there. But like, I don't remember hearing, like, for example, Hell's Bells or something like that on the radio until like the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of like there had to be this time where the radio said, okay, well, everyone's listening to this. And even though it's called Hell's Bells, it's not actually, conjuring Satan.
Yeah.
So, like, it's actually okay if you listen to this, you're not actually going to go to hell. But yeah, it took a long time for that to sort of filter in into Canadian radio anyways. Yeah,
we had it in Boston. I think the Boston music scene was kind of progressive. And we go on a different show, different topic.
You had some good bands coming out of there then.
We had a lot of strong hardcore punk rock back then. And that was my thing. Right before bodybuilding, actually.
Right before classical music?
Yeah, well, I did classical at the same time.
Now all of a sudden
they were in parallel. They were in parallels. For whatever reason, that's my style, always has been. I listened to Mozart's Requiem and SSD Control. That was me. Yeah, but that was the era. And then it changed, obviously, as we know. Well, and I don't think it was all bad. I don't think it was all good. But seeing the fall of Lee Haney and the rise of people like Dorian Yates was impressive. And people like Sean Ray continued through that. Some people continued to compete and kind of bridge the gap. Which was interesting to see. But yeah, different era. After that.
Yeah, well, that was really informative. So thanks a lot for sharing all of that stuff. It was
thanks for letting me ramble.
I learned a lot of stuff that I didn't know about, and that whole image of the hair mullets, neon colors, Ferraris, and Miami Vice is just that's
Yeah, that was it, man. Yeah.
That must have been a very
Jack and Ice.
yeah.
Yeah, it was good talking about this with you, Craig. I enjoyed it. I probably talk about it more because it was a big part of my life, especially when I was young.
Absolutely.
Bodybuilding years are very important,
Yeah, cool. Well, that's yeah, interesting that you start, and I'm sure that, like, as these as we talk further, that we'll have more of these sort of snippets that come from those days popping up as well.
For sure. I'm sure we have lots of stories we can pepper here and there, for sure. Yeah.
That's the benefit of having 100 years of bodybuilding experience.
Yes.
The two of us, right? Yeah. So.
A long time indeed. Yeah. I think probably maybe we'll close out the 80s this time and jump into the 2000s next time. Which probably is a bit more your era, being a wee bit younger than I am. So
yeah, no, I mean, definitely the 90s was pretty that was when I got into it, for sure. And that's when I really fell in love with it. Like, I had mentioned before that I had tried to get involved earlier, but wasn't able to.
Let's talk about that next time. I want to hear about that.
Yeah, all right. Let's do that. Let's save that for next time then.
Okay. All
cool.
Right.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Matt. It's been great. And,
thank you.
I'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah, we'll talk again, and I'll do it this time. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like this content. And of course, as always, like and subscribe, but also leave us your comments. If you have something you want to hear about, if you can. We want to, the best part of this is sharing with other people. So we want to talk about what you want to talk about. So please drop us a note. And until next time, see you later, Craig.
All right,
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.